Thanks for tuning in to the Drive On podcast, where we are focused on giving hope and strength to the entire military community. Whether you're a veteran, active duty, guard, reserve, or a family member, this podcast will share inspirational stories and resources that are useful to you. I'm your host, Scott DeLucio, and now let's get on with the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to Drive On. I'm your host, Scott DeLucio, and today my guest is Brian Fleming. Brian is a combat wounded military veteran, Army veteran, a motivational speaker and author who has dedicated over 16 years to helping trauma survivors heal by sharing their stories. He has spoken to over 500,000 people worldwide and developed the Use Your Story program to guide others in transforming their lives. Today, we're going to discuss how sharing your story can heal trauma and transform lives and hopefully help some folks out along the way. So before we get into that, Brian, I want to welcome you to the show. Really glad to have you here.
Hey, thanks for having me, fellow 11 Bravo.
Yes.
When you told me you were infantry, I'm like, oh, this is going to be good.
I know when you get another infantryman, I mean, it could go one of two ways. It can go really good or it can go downhill real quick. And
But even that can be good if you have other 11 Bravos listening.
That's true. So stay tuned. We'll see. Tell us a little bit about your time in the military. You said you were deployed to Afghanistan before we started talking here, and your experiences there and kind of how it led you to what you do now.
Yeah, I joined the Army straight out of high school in Miami, Florida back in 2003. Joined as Army infantry. Army said, hey, well, we'll even give you $5,000 to shoot some big guns and blow some stuff up if you sign here. And I'm like, I'm 18, $5,000, dude. I'm about to buy my mom a house, retire. Oh, that didn't happen. But yeah, it was just after 9/11, and so big war effort was going on. Afghanistan was heating up, and a lot to be done. And at that time, 9/11 was still so fresh in everyone's minds that you can't just sit back and do nothing when something like that happens. So it always cracks me up when I hear people say, "Oh, we never should have been there." It's like, were you fucking alive in 2001? like, do you remember? Like, you don't just sit back and do nothing. Especially you're
Right.
America. Like, we're always looking for a fight. And so, anyways, I joined the Army's infantry. Went through basic training and all that infantry training at Fort Benning in August to December of 2003. And yeah, nice and hot. I didn't think any place north of Florida could be hotter than Miami. I think Fort Benning was in August. It was pretty intense, but
I think they import heat there and humidity and
yeah,
all the creatures that can kill you. They import those and
yeah.
they just drop them in the woods. So when you're sleeping out in the middle of the woods at night, this thing that's crawling across your face, it's probably going to kill you.
Yeah, you got your little shelter half, that they make you think you're going to use from World War II that nobody uses anymore. Yeah, there's a hole in the ozone shining right
Yeah.
down in Fort Benning. But
Exactly.
yeah, went through that, over at Sand Hill, Alpha 150, and well, let's say I went to South Korea for my first unit, 1 year, 2nd Infantry Division. They gave me a saw. If you don't know, or you do, but for those who don't know, it's a M249 squad automatic weapon. It's a lightweight machine gun, and I grew up watching Rambo and Arnold Schwarzenegger and things like that, and Commando and Predator. So when I got assigned that saw in Korea, I remember the first time with the range, like 18 and stupid. I thought, this is my Rambo moment. Like, do you remember that scene from Predator with the 50 cal, and he just mows down the jungle for like a minute straight,
Yep.
like unlimited Hollywood ammo.
Right.
Well, I was like, that's what I'm gonna do on this range, and so I just held down the trigger on that saw, and I got kicked in the head because I'm in the prone, right?
Yep.
And I got kicked in the head, and it's the first sergeant, and he goes, I can't hardly hear anything at this point. I look up at him, and he's like, "Private, the fuck are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh my god, that's a first sergeant. That's like an E8, man. Like, he's basically God." I'm like, didn't know what to say, so I was like, "Roger, first sergeant." And he goes, "No, what the hell are you doing?" I was like, "Roger, first sergeant." He goes, "What?" And I was like, "Roger, first sergeant." He's like, "Whatever, quit that. 3-round burst." I don't know what he was doing out there. I mean, I don't know, he's supervising or something. Obviously, far more accurate 3 to 5 round bursts. But I
Yes.
had to have my Rambo moment. It was worth getting kicked in the helmet. Yeah. So yeah, other than that, South Korea was pretty good.
Yeah.
Super hot and probably the coldest I've ever been in my life.
The extremes. Yeah.
Yeah, the summers are like Miami. The winters are literally like Alaska. So spent a
Yeah.
year there. Got assigned to the 10th Mountain Division after that, which was kind of weird because my orders from Korea said 10th Mountain Division, Fort Polk, Louisiana, which is awkward because 10th Mountain is up in New York
Right.
and Fort Drum. And I took my orders back, and the branch manager, I said, "Hey, these are wrong. 10th Mountain's in New York." She goes, "No, Private Fleming, you're wrong. The 10th Mountain Division, by the way, which for anyone who doesn't know, is a light infantry mountain warfare brigade." And she said they're starting a new 4th Brigade in Fort Polk, Louisiana.
Lucky
I said,
you.
so it's a light mountain warfare light infantry unit, and you're putting it in a swamp. Yeah, and then sending us to Afghanistan, which is mountainous. And that was when I first learned about the term military intelligence. It's the biggest oxymoron in the world.
Yeah.
So yeah, to make it short, I got assigned there. I was a team leader with the 10th Mountain Division in an infantry platoon and got deployed in '06 to Afghanistan.
And so how was that deployment, for you, in '06?
Oh, I had a blast a couple times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally, right?
Literally, yeah. Yeah, I got married 3 months before I deployed, and I'm happy to say that in December we will be celebrating 19 years. So,
Excellent.
um,
Congratulations.
yeah, very fortunate. I'm that rare story that stayed married, and that's the divorce thing. That's actually probably one post-war issue battle I've not had to fight. Like
Excellent.
everything else, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, all that stuff. Like, yeah, been there, done that, got all the t-shirts. Because once you get wounded in combat, I mean, these nonprofits like Wounded Warrior Project, man, they'll send you all kinds of t-shirts and stuff with their giant logos on them.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
like, man, I'm not your billboard, but I did get quite a few t-shirts. But yeah, so about a month after arriving there, my up armored Humvee ran over a double stack of anti tank mines buried in the road. This was the
Mm.
first time my vehicle was blown up, and blew it up, set it on fire about 7 o'clock in the morning. We were in the Arghandab Valley, and yeah, didn't really hear the explosion. Dust kind of went everywhere. Time kind of stood still. Didn't know what happened momentarily. Then I had the thought, like, I think we just got blown up. My gunner was laying next to me, and he should have been standing up in the turret, but he got
Sure.
boosted out of the turret and then came crashing back down. And I was in the back seat on the driver's side. The rear tire on the passenger side ran over the pressure plate. And so one of my guys who was sitting there, he was sort of half conscious. He was really kind of concussed by the blast, and I was able to drag him out and get him out. Two of the guys were injured, but both returned to duty a month later. Just minor injuries, thankfully. It wasn't anything, uh, deadly in that
Mhm.
case. And so, yeah, that was about a month after arriving in country.
It's a warm welcoming that you got there.
Yeah.
Um, you know, so after all of these events, that you experienced, being deployed and all that, um, you you obviously came back home. You made it through that deployment.
Well,
Um
I didn't make it through that deployment because there
Oh,
was
you
a
didn't
sec.
make it all the way through.
No, there was a second explosion. They
Okay,
got they
let's
got
let's
yeah,
continue on that. Let's continue down that road. Go ahead.
yeah. So after getting blown up the first time, I had this crazy idea that I wanted to reclass my job from infantry to EOD. And for those who don't know, EOD is explosive ordnance disposal. They're the bomb squad. So basically, if you see that guy running, you better be in front of him. It's that kind of thing. If it blows up, it's their business. And so I don't know why I wanted to do that after getting even blasted that first time, but I did. Well, I had this thing on my medical profile that said P3. Basically, it meant I was physically unfit for duty, which is weird because I've been chasing and hunting Taliban up and down mountains for 5 months. I was in incredible shape. I was in best shape of
Sure.
my life. And so I had to go to Kandahar because I was at Fob Lagman, a couple hours north of Kandahar, in a little town called Kalat. And they didn't have a doctor there who could reevaluate me. So I had to go to Kandahar to get reevaluated, get that taken off of my medical records. Well, 2 miles from the main gate to Kandahar airfield, we're driving down Highway 1. Out of nowhere, this minivan gets right up next to my door. I'm the TC, the truck commander, in the lead vehicle of about a 15 vehicle convoy. Gets right up next to my door, slams into it, and explodes. blows the entire minivan into billions of pieces, including himself. It was a suicide bomber inside this van, and I don't remember anything happening until I woke up. I woke up laying face down, burned and bloody, laying in a ditch on the side of Highway 1 in Kandahar. And my first thought when I woke up was, I don't remember going to sleep here because I was laying down. Last thing I knew, I was in the vehicle. Next thing I know, I blink my eyes and I'm like laying in a ditch.
Wow.
And yeah, so I thought, well, maybe we're in a gunfight. Like, why don't I remember just laying down here? And then I can't find my weapon, which, I just, as you know, that's like, you don't
That
go anywhere.
you don't do that.
It's like you're missing your arms.
Yeah.
Well, my weapon was still in the vehicle. I was not. And
Oh,
so, I did sort of a push up, got to my feet. My face and neck were full face and neck second degree burns, which have healed now. Full thickness third degree on both of my hands. And uh, yeah, just kind of walked around a little bit, kind of dazed. There was car parts, body parts everywhere. I remember walking past like a severed leg that was blasted off at the femur, and I thought, "Holy crap! Is that mine?" Like I thought it was mine for some reason, but I'm walking past it, so I'm a
right.
little concussed at this point.
Yeah.
So I looked at it and I looked at my legs, and I'm like, "Well, it's not mine." And I looked around at other people. Well, they all have their legs, and so I'm just like piecing this together in the moment. And about 120, 130 degrees outside at this point. Um, the burns were getting really painful about 10, 15 minutes later because the adrenaline in my
Yeah.
body started wearing off. And so we got medevaced, and I went from Kandahar to Bagram to Landstuhl, Germany, and from there to San Antonio, Texas, where I spent a year and 2 months at Brooke Army Medical Center. And so I went. I'll say this: I went from Kandahar to San Antonio in 3 days, and the medical care I got from the military, absolute best in the world. They took such good care of me and kept me alive. Uh, Absolutely stellar. Like if I had a life threatening anything, I would say, right now, I'd say, get me those guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that from other people who have had significant injuries like that, that the care that they got, whether it was at Walter Reed or, other places that they might have been at. Um,
You want to hear something crazy?
Go ahead.
This was in '06. I went back in 2013 for 4 or 5 days. I got a chance to go back, speak to the troops, things like that. And I was at the same field hospital at Kandahar Airfield that I got medevaced out of. I was talking to the PA there who runs the hospital there. This is the guy, like he runs everything. He said over the past, at that point, this was 2013. He said, according to their own numbers, because they log it, they track their own stats and variables and factors and all that. He said, our medical care is so good. He said, 99% of people who come here injured, whether they're burned, whether they're missing one or three or four limbs. He said, if they have a heartbeat, if they arrive in this hospital with a heartbeat, 99% of the time we save their life.
Wow.
99%. And that this is the guy who runs the place. Like, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't have believed that if somebody else had told me, but this is a guy, this is their own numbers. If
Uh-huh.
you have a heartbeat, no matter your condition, 99% of the time they can save you.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I I wonder if there are hospitals stateside that, can can boast those kind of numbers, from, you know, gunshots and, all those kind of things. I
I
don't
don't know.
I'm just guessing no, but that's speculation. I
But
don't know.
you've
There
been in the
there might be.
military as well. You know how dedicated and like I mean, we will spend hours on somebody if that's what it takes. Like we won't sleep,
Yep,
we won't eat, we won't breathe if we like until like something's taken care of, especially if it's somebody's life threatened.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's where that selfless service comes in. We'll move mountains to make sure that that person makes it through.
Yeah.
Um, so okay, so you did not make it all the way through that deployment.
Five 5 months out of 9.
5 out of 9. Hey, you know what? That's not bad.
5 out of 9 ain't bad. I
That ain't
think there's
bad.
a cold classic rock song goes.
Yeah, right. Um,
That's 2 out of 3. Yeah.
2 out of 3, whatever it is, it's still you you did what was asked of you, and that's the important part, and I think for folks who have a situation like that, who come back home and they're like, I didn't do the whole deployment or whatever. I didn't finish my deployment either, uh, and for different reasons, but not to get into that right now. Um, but it's like you did what was asked of you, and that's and you couldn't have done more at that point. You know what I mean? Like they're not going to send you back burned and broken and everything.
Yeah.
You weren't doing the job if you went back at that in that stage of your healing, right?
Yeah.
Um, so you went through the treatment, got I'm assuming you got medically discharged at that point,
Yeah.
or how did
Yeah.
that go? Okay.
I got medically put out, and I'll tell you that the explosion wasn't the worst part of the injury. The worst part was when I arrived at Brooke Army Medical Center, because I didn't know what they have to do to you when you're burned, like severely burned. The first night I arrived there, it was a Friday night, and they wheeled me into the shower room, and I remember the head nurse looking at me, and he said, "Hey, Sergeant Fleming, we're going to do this as quickly as possible, so it'll be as painless as possible." And I had no idea what he meant, but I thought in that moment, like, that doesn't sound good. And it was at that point, him and two or three other nurses all pulled out razor blades, and they had to start shaving and ripping and tearing the burn charred skin off my hands and face and neck like a piece of burnt chicken, because I would have died of infection
Yep.
if they didn't get it cleaned. And they have to do it, and they have to keep you awake through it, because if they put you under anesthesia and they have to do it multiple times, they're afraid you'll slip into a coma. And
Mhm.
so this took about a half hour. Basically felt like getting flayed alive. It was the worst fucking thing in the world. I just wanted to die in the moment. If I could just go unconscious somehow, you know. But
Yeah.
that didn't happen, and I wanted to resist him. I naturally instinct you wanted to fight him and like, whoa, what the hell? But I knew they were doing what they had
Right.
to keep me alive. So I just laid there and took it. And I say this a lot too. I have a lot of respect for nurses and doctors and people who have to do that kind of stuff, especially in a burn ward of a hospital. Because, you and I, we can do infantry stuff. We can kick in doors, shoot bad guys, go drag them out of there if we have to. Um, s- Skinning somebody alive to save their life, that would be so mentally tough. For like, I would do it if it was like a combat situation.
Yeah.
But in a hospital is my full time job. That takes a special person who's not me.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I as you're talking about that, I think you and I are on the same page with that because as you're talking about that, in the moment, like, I need to do this right now to in order to save that person. I'm doing whatever it takes. It doesn't matter. Um, but when you have time to sit there and think and plan and figure out, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna go walk down the hall and grab some of those razor blades and start picking away at this guy's skin. Um, man, there's some premeditation that goes on with that. That takes
Yeah.
a
Can you
special
imagine
level of
can you imagine
person to be able to
waking
do
up in the morning and you're like, "Well, I'm gonna go to work and, here's what I'm probably gonna have to do again today."
that. Yeah.
I
Uh,
mean, yeah.
I mean, God bless him, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeez. Yeah, it takes a special kind of person, and yeah, that's why the infantry really uh, has a fondness for the medics and doctors and nurses and all those kind of people because they're the ones who keep them alive when
Oh, yeah, we talk the most shit to those medics, man, but when you get blown up or shot, man, that's the first guy you're calling for.
yeah, yeah, and you're
And they
calling for
and
doc.
yeah, calling for doc, and the ones I've experienced, they did their jobs well, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. So after all of this, you mentioned earlier you dealt with a bunch of issues, PTSD and all the issues that came from this deployment. You eventually started sharing your story. How did that help you heal from the trauma that you experienced?
Yeah, the first thing about that is I never meant to do it.
Okay.
So, I mean, you don't usually come home from war and say, "Hey, I'm going to go talk about this in front of audiences." And, a lot of
Yeah.
it, I mean, I don't talk about it. A lot of things aren't worth mentioning, but,
Sure.
you know, um, I met a guy who was a Vietnam vet. His name's Dave Reaver. He was burned in Vietnam, and he came to the hospital and gave a speech to me and like 30 other guys who've been blown up, shot up, all kinds of stuff. And he was, he had half his face and body burned off by a phosphorus grenade that blew up in his hand. Sniper aiming for his head, shot through his hand by accident, blew the grenade and burned half his body off. He was on a riverboat. And so he survived it. Well, he'd been an author and speaker for 30, 35 some years, probably at that point, maybe longer. And he couldn't talk about the pain of his injury without making us all laugh hysterically. And I thought that was really cool because, I mean, he's like, hey, I jumped in the water, and saw my skin floating beside me. He's like, man, I was beside myself. He's like, I had to pull myself together. And I'm like, oh my God, this is great. Like, yeah, this is like infantry funny. And
Yeah,
so,
right.
um, so we talked afterwards. We hit it off. We became great friends. And he, about a month later, I met him on January 25th of '07. I was injured July 24th of '06. So this was only 6 months after my injury, 6, 7 months. And this was very, very recent after my injury. And he invited me, I got a call from his office to come to one of his patriotic rallies he was speaking at. Well, I didn't know, but he pulled me up on stage, like right in the middle of it.
Oh,
And I was still in burn bandages. And I mean, I was still in rehab. My face was still kind of pink from the second-degree burns healing. And there were 3,000 people at this event. And people say, well, did you get butterflies? And like, no, there wasn't time. It was like getting a baseball, thrown in your face, fastball from 5 feet away. It's like, you don't catch it. You just react, you
yeah,
know?
right.
And so I say basically, hey, I'm Brian. I got blown up. I'm good. I'll be fine. And I guess I'm still here for a reason. Go for it. Whatever. I don't know. Worst motivational speech ever, probably. But I had a lady. This is what really changed when I got off stage. It was like a 1 degree shift that changed my life. This lady came up to me. She was in her 20s. And she said, she just didn't even tell me her name. She just walks up and goes, hey, Brian, I was raped and molested growing up. And then all throughout my childhood, all throughout my teen years, she said my boyfriend was abusive. We recently broke up. And 2 weeks ago, I tried to kill myself. And I was just like, wow, gosh, like, I'm so sorry. Like,
Yeah.
are you okay? Like, is there anything I can do for you? Like, I mean, you don't every day have someone just come up and tell you that, which is really interesting given, she didn't know me. This was,
Mhm.
that's not something you normally tell people. And she said, but if you can survive all that, talking about Afghanistan, she said, I think I can get through this. And that right there changed everything. And I didn't know why. I didn't know why exactly. Something came out of me I didn't know was in me.
Mhm.
And people always ask, like, what was like the big thing? What was the one thing, that helped you get back on your feet and move forward productively in life? Well, it wasn't any one thing, but I can tell you, it was that instant. That's what it was. But for years, I couldn't describe what happened inside me until I read a book by Dr. Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning. He was a psychiatrist, an Austrian Jew. He was a Holocaust survivor from the Nazi prison camps. He survived it and then
Mhm.
taught about the psychology of concentration camps until he died. I mean, incredible. And he said this. This is what actually happened in that moment when I talked to this young lady. I didn't know how to describe what happened in 1,000 words, but Viktor Frankl, he said it in one sentence. And here's what he said. He said, in some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering. At the moment, it finds a meaning. In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering. At the moment, it finds a meaning. Well,
Mm.
I found a meaning in that moment because I realized, hey, she's probably not going to go home and put a pistol in her mouth and pull the trigger or drink a bottle of pills. Maybe, if for nothing else, maybe I was injured because I was supposed to be here today because she needed to see someone else who was surviving and that will get her through her next day and her next step. I don't know, but when your suffering has some sort of meaning with it attached to it, or it's for something you believe in, or it matters, you're not just suffering. It becomes something like an altered version of suffering. It's like you'd rather suffer for a cause than suffer for nothing.
Right.
In fact, Viktor Frankl, he even had his own definition of despair. Despair is basically known as a textbook definition of complete loss of hope. Viktor Frankl, his definition of despair is suffering without meaning. And I found a sense of meaning early on after my injury. It was through meeting her and speaking. And so using my story was never about talking about myself and, hey, look what happened to me. And we all have a story. It
Yeah.
was about saying, hey, here's what happened. Here's what I learned through it. And here's how it applies to your life so you can win some sort of battle you're facing. That's what using your story is all about.
That's not too bad for the world's worst motivational speech. I think I think you did okay with that speech. You're not giving yourself enough credit there. Um, but to your point, there's some suffering that we all encounter. No one gets through life unscathed, right?
Yeah.
We all have some sort of suffering. It may not be getting blown up by an IED or suicide bombers or things like that, but everybody has stuff that they
Everyone gets
deal with,
blown
right?
up. It's just different. Yeah.
Yeah, whether it's literally or figuratively, there's different kinds of things that happen to you, and you have those bombshell moments where it's like this is changing the trajectory of my life, and
Yeah.
and now maybe it's a divorce or a death of a loved one, or it's combat related, or in this woman's case, a rape or something like that, or an abusive relationship, whatever. um But I tell people this a lot, and part of the reason why I wanted to have you on the show is that sometimes your story, or the lessons that you've learned from your story and your journey, can be like that spark that helps that one person get on the path to recovery, or help find their sense of purpose or meaning. It helps get them out of that hole that they might be in, and sometimes that's the meaning, right? That's the meaning behind it. And you're you exist now to go out and help these people. Maybe not that's your full sense of meaning, but
And part of the meaning was that it also gave me a new mission to pursue and go after, because I was within a year of getting out of the military at this point, like nine
mhm,
months. And one of the big things that I think a lot of military veterans don't realize is that when you get out of the military, you need to already have your next mission planned. Nobody's handing out the missions anymore.
right.
You're creating and carrying out, executing the missions. And if you don't find your next mission before you get out, that can make for a really rough transition. And it's not always communicated very well. For some reason, I can't imagine why this is a problem, but you're just not prepared in certain ways. And so
Yeah.
my point is that, like, I found my next mission before I got out. And I was very fortunate for that,
Mhm,
because I found it because I met this guy to no credit of my own. Like, our paths collided.
sure. And sometimes you have to keep your eyes and ears open
Mhm.
for those fate moments where you're going to meet somebody who can open those doors to that next move, that next career, that next thing that you're gonna do. um, they are gonna help you, and use those people. I said use, but, like,
In a
don't
good way.
use them, yeah, in a good
Yeah,
way,
absolutely.
utilize the resource, I should
Take
say.
full advantage of any opportunity they're willing to give you.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I don't mean it in a, abusive,
No, of course not.
anything like that. It's just, but if the resource is available, it would be nuts not to, use that resource.
Yeah.
It's like we have highways all around us, but you know what? I'm gonna go trek through the desert instead. Like, that's stupid. You wouldn't do that.
Take
You
the
take the
interstate.
Yeah, exactly. So, um, now folks who were in a situation kind of similar to yours, endured some sort of trauma, whether it was combat related, or other, trauma just in general. Um, a lot of times they get stuck and they continue suffering through this trauma. Um, what are some mistakes that keep them in that stuck area? What are some things that they can do to help get themselves out of that?
Yeah, there were 3 things that were present in my life that year, and my time, immediately following getting out of the military. There were 3 things that years later I realized were present in my life, and I did not know it. And I look back and it's like, well, why was I able to move forward productively? Now, everyone's journey is different. I mean, you can't compare them,
Right.
because nobody's not all the variables and factors are equal. But for me, I realized The three things that I had in my life that other friends of mine who were injured in Iraq and Afghanistan they had in their lives, and even historically, people who had overcome just astronomical trauma who bounced back and move forward in life. Like, what did all these people have in common, including me? I was able to narrow it down to three things. It was a sense of meaning in your suffering. It was having a mentor in your life, someone to help lead you and guide you, and having a mission to live for that goes beyond just yourself or your own gain. So it was finding meaning in that suffering, which I did. I talked about meeting that young lady. I had a mentor in my life, Dave. I mean, when I got out of the military, I worked for Dave's company, and then I traveled with him on weekends. And he put me on his stages for 2 or 3 minutes at a time. He mentored me in that, and before I knew it, I was booking my own speaking events, and it was awesome. And so I had a sense of meaning that, and the mentor that helped me do that. And then I had that next mission. I wanted to keep doing that because I would meet people everywhere
Mhm,
from all walks of life, all kinds of things they've been through. And somehow what I was saying was helping them. And what was really interesting, I didn't realize this for years. People say, wow, Brian, like you really helped a lot of people, or that young lady, but truth is, yes, I I'm glad to hear that. But when it comes to that young lady, for example, she actually helped me.
yeah,
She didn't even know she helped me find a sense of meaning in my suffering. So now when I go out and speak, it's like I meet people from all walks of life who are fighting their own battles. We all have energy and we all feed off of each other's energy and we share energy. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but it just the simplest way I know to put it visually is like we're all energy and we're all just sharing energy with each other. Sometimes I'm low, you'll share it with me. Sometimes you're low and I'm higher, and I'll share with you. And it raises us all up. And it's
yeah,
just we have to be open to that though too, because
sure.
one of the things I've always had on my side, if I had any advantage over anyone, I wouldn't call it an advantage because anyone can do it. But I've always been optimistic. I'm always open to new things. I'm always open to possibilities that I might not see. That's
Mhm.
why when I happened to meet Dave, I wasn't even supposed to be at the hospital that day. And boy, if I wasn't, we wouldn't even be talking right now. My whole
Yeah,
life would be different.
yeah,
But I was open enough to, like you said earlier, situational awareness. Keep your head on a swivel. Be looking out for things and just observing, not only for the bad but for the good, for
yeah,
opportunities that could be around. And sometimes you're looking and you find nothing, and then when you're not looking, it slaps you in the face and just it
right.
collides with you. And so, but yeah, the meaning, the mentoring, and the mission, those three things, the world's most resilient people all tend to have in common. There are more than just three, but those are the three foundational ones that I've found.
And it's interesting because you talked about how this woman, came approached you and told her, uh, what happened to her and all that, but in a way, she used her story to help you.
Yeah.
And now you're it's kinda like a cyclical thing, like, she used her story, now you're using your story and you're helping other people, and then
And Dave
those
used
people are
his story. I thought
and
the
sure,
I thought the same thing of him that she thought of me when I met him.
uh-huh,
Yeah.
yeah, so I guess I'm putting that out there because there's somebody out there who's the wheels are turning right now, like, they're starting to go in their head, and they're like, "I do have a story. I could use it. How could I use it? How is this going to help anyone?" And that type of thing. Well, it could. I mean, they're hearing your story right now and how your story is helping other people and
Mhm.
how that woman's story helped you and hey, man, there could be some other people out there who are listening right now who have that story that can help other people. And I'm sure they want it to help other people. I'm sure they don't want other people to go through the same thing that they went through and all that kind of stuff, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's usually the biggest motive. Like, I can
Yeah,
stop people from suffering as much as I did.
exactly.
They either avoid it altogether or get through the aftermath faster. That's
And
the yeah.
Yeah, and you hear that from people who get into careers like psychology or, counselors or and things like that, therapists, where they may and this is I'm not making a general statement of everybody in that industry, but there are people who have experienced some sort of trauma in their past,
Mhm.
and they are using that to help other people, because I don't want people to suffer the way that I did. I want them to get through this and be better off. And so they use that as their why. Their why am I doing this? Because I don't want other people to deal with what I had to deal with and go through that. It's very similar, I think.
Totally.
Some people who become police officers. They had a family member who was murdered or something, when they were young. So I'm going to become a police officer. I'm going to get those people off the streets, that type of thing. You kind of lean into it and you use it, and it's like I'm going to use my my trauma for good, and I'm not going to get the stuck in the muck of whatever this is and not be able to move forward, and that's what you're doing. That's what a lot of these people do. And so I think that's it's really a great thing that you're doing, great thing that a lot of these people are doing. But I know there's people who have a little resistance, a little hesitance. Like I don't want to do that. Do you have any advice for people who might be on the fence and might want to take the leap into this, but just aren't quite too sure about it?
Yeah, if you don't want to do it, don't do it.
There you go. I like it. It's
Yeah, it's
straightforward.
like yeah, exactly. If this isn't your thing, you'll know it.
Yeah.
But one thing you find is that uh, it's very healing to share your story. Um, Now, the way you make people want to hear your story, this is like a marketing 101, but not in a cheesy or bad way. Like you have to, if you want to get booked to speak, you have to get people to care about it and be
Mhm.
like, why should we care? Because I was, I was at Brooke Army Medical Center. Guys were burned way worse than me, missing arms, legs. Physically deformed permanently. I thought, well, who would want to hear my story? I didn't even think about using it. Like, why would I tell it to anyone who would care, who would want to hear it? And what I found was we live in a world that gives attention to problems. If you marry your story to a problem that a group of people has, and you talk about how your story relates to that problem and the lessons you learned that helps overcome that problem that people are dealing with, people suddenly care. It's
Yeah.
not because, and I say this all the time, nobody who books me to speak cares about my story. They care about what my story can do for them. And that sounds bad, but it's the truth.
Mhm.
When they have budgets and money on the line and all kinds of things, they're looking to hire a speaker. They're not just hiring me because I'm not a pretty face. I'm a man. And I don't think any of us are pretty. So, but they're not doing it for that reason. They're doing it because they have this vision of where they want to go and something, a problem, and enemies in the way on their battlefield. And somehow they see me as being like a piece in that puzzle that can help them complete the puzzle the way they want to.
Mhm.
And so think about think about like what problems you've overcome in your life. And look at yourself. That's look at yourself 3 to 5 years ago. If you've gotten past something, and even if you haven't, if you're not totally out of the woods yet with something, I was speaking on PTSD and what was working for me before I was really out of the woods. But it's like, hey, here's a sit rep situation report. Like, here's where I'm at now, and I found this is helping me at least. Maybe it won't help you. Maybe it will.
Mhm.
You can't disqualify yourself. And so, yeah, find a problem in the world that you've overcome or that you can speak to. Your story is just the hook. But the lessons that can help them, that's the real meat of the lessons. And you don't have to have some crazy story like, you know, getting attacked by a suicide bomber or, Bethany Hamilton getting her arm bit off by a shark or the guy who had to saw his arm off with a Swiss Army knife in the desert because, he was trapped under a boulder. Like,
Right.
my God, I can't imagine. You don't have to have that kind of story. Most of the highly successful, famous speakers you and I have ever heard speak, and we all know their names, most of them do not have what I would consider to be some insanely extreme life story. They have a story, and it matters. But it's not one of these like, oh, I can't relate to that because I wasn't injured by a suicide bomber who blew up 3 feet away from me. Like, you don't have to, because it's
Right.
not about the story itself. It's about the lessons you learn that help other people win their battles. You start thinking along those lines, and people suddenly want to talk to you. They want you to come speak. They want you to share. Because they see the value in your experience.
Yeah, and I think with, taking your story and kinda crafting it in a way that, uh not crafting, but, the coming up with a story that, that people are gonna actually give a damn about. Um, you're right, not a lot of people are going to relate to being blown up by a suicide bomber. But the lessons that you learn from that, the takeaways from that, um, they understand that a suicide bomber blowing himself up is a thing that happens, right? But they can take those lessons and it's like, how are those lessons going to help me? How can someone who had it just like that woman said to you, if you had it that bad and you can overcome all that, I think I can do that too. You know, how can they take those lessons and apply it to themselves or their, their business or whatever it is, and come out better in the
Well,
end? And I think
yeah,
that's what you're getting at, right?
yeah, that, and also realize that we all get hurt in different ways, but we
Mhm.
all deal with a lot of the same issues. There's only a finite number of issues that human beings deal with as a result of trauma. I can come home from Afghanistan, injured by a suicide bomber, fighting Taliban, all that shit, and have post traumatic stress that I deal with. You can also have someone who grew up in an abusive household who
Yep.
equally deals with the same exact symptoms of post traumatic stress. The cause was different. Doesn't matter. Where we really relate is on the effect of it that we deal with. Or, somebody says somebody who had a blunt force trauma. And, I've had some of those. And they go, man, I get headaches every day. 5 minutes after I'm done eating breakfast, I can't remember what I ate. I can't seem to stay organized. Can't sleep at night. And I'm like, holy crap, dude, were you in the military too? Like, did we come from the same place? And they go, no, I was in a car accident. And it's like, oh, well, dude, I can totally relate to that because I this or you're hyper vigilant. You're just always looking out for things because you're living in your survival brain because you had to. You know, I I you can grow up in a turbulent, hostile environment and have that same mindset of somebody like you or I who comes home from a actual legit war zone.
Hmm.
So we relate not just on what we go through, but also even more so the effects of that we all deal with as a result of what we go through. That's where the empathy and connection really happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And when you when you get um, that connection, and you've connected on that on some sort of level, then I think that's where the real impact will come through, and you'll actually be able to get through to those people and help them with dealing with whatever it is that they maybe they've been stuck for years on whatever this thing is, and just hearing just the way you phrase something and how you work through it, that could just be that thing that unlocks you know whatever the trauma is that they've been dealing with. And so I feel like, um, for especially for those people who are struggling to find a sense of purpose or meaning or a new mission in life after getting out of the military. I mean, it might be that thing for you, and it could help those other people as well. So, um, I know part of what you do is you're out there helping other people use their story and get out and uh, you know get out there and do this type of thing. Tell us a little bit about what you do with in that regards and how you help people use their story.
Yeah, for years after getting off the stage at my events, I've had people come up to me and say, "Man, that was awesome. Um, I have a story too.
Mhm.
I would love to share it. How do I do what you do?" Because they don't teach what I do in college. This ain't your college speech class. This is a
Sure.
business. This is a professional speaking business. Uh, Booking and getting paid to speak and branding, marketing, having a message that matters and knowing how to craft that and say things right. Like how do you even get into doing this? All the questions I would have had in the beginning if I hadn't found my mentor.
Mhm.
And so that's what gave me the idea for Use Your Story, which, go to useyourstory.com if you're interested in learning how to share your story with the world and make a difference and help. If you go there, I have a free resource called the free Share Your Story Roadmap. It's a like a one-page PDF with about a 14-minute video, and it literally shows you how to make your first $500 speaking in the next 30 days or less, and doing that by making a difference sharing your story. Now, I put the $500 thing there because one, it's so easily doable, it's ridiculous. And once you do it, you realize, oh my gosh, I have a certain power. It's like being able to communicate effectively is a superpower. Like
Yeah.
Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is a superpower. You can be like half my size and a woman and twice my age and kick my ass. It's happened. I've been in jujitsu just where that happened once, and it was like the most humbling moment ever. Well,
Sure.
speaking is the same way. Being able to communicate value effectively and clearly. Well, that's what I show you how to do, because if you want to make any difference with whatever you're doing, you have to know how to be financially productive with it. You have to be able to get money out of it and put money
Mhm.
into it, because you won't reach as many people if you don't. And so that's why it's important. I talk about how to make money speaking. It's not about the money. I didn't know there was any money. It turns out there's tons of money in it, and
Yeah.
there's tons of ways to make money with it. But yeah, go to useyourstory.com if you want to use your story, become a speaker, share your story with the world in some way. And again, I'll show you how to make your first $500 with it, and also how to make a difference with it, how to structure it in a way where it's effective and people like it and they receive it well and they see the value in it. So that's free. So just check it out at useyourstory.com if you want.
Excellent. And so I'll have a link to that in the show notes for folks to check it out and get those resources and hopefully book their first $500 booking in the next 30 days. That would be awesome. This is nice way to end the year with a booking like that, and then hopefully gets their new year kicked off in the right direction. Um, so Brian, really, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, hearing about your story and how you used it to help out other people, and how you're helping other people now use their own stories to get out there and deliver that in front of other people. So it's really incredible. I thank you for everything that you're doing, and thank you for taking the time to come on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Drive On podcast. If you want to support the show, please check out Scott's book, Surviving Son, on Amazon. All of the sales from that book go directly back into this podcast and work to help veterans in need. You can also follow the Drive On podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts.